What's with this room? It's covered in blood and rust. This is my room, but what the hell's happened to it? This room, is it really my room? It's in terrible shape. The air is so heavy, my head hurts. Creepy, it looks like a face. What the hell am I writing? How long has it been since I left this room? I can't tell if it's been days or hours. I don't think I can protect myself. He's truly insane. He used this place as the locus for the creation of his world. I'm certain he must have performed the ritual of the Holy Assumption near here. I'm just not strong enough to stop him anymore. He locked me up in this room and played with me just like a toy. My eyes are starting to go blind. The pain. I can feel my body starting to die. But things are taken care of. Whoever lives here after me, you will be the 21st, the last of the sacrifice. I leave it up to you. One night, police were called to the scene of a double homicide. A man, aged 24, was arrested at the scene. The police caught the man red-handed. At the scene were two bodies, both brutally murdered with an axe and their hearts removed. Both were children. An old schoolmate of the suspect had this to say. He didn't look like the type of guy who would kill kids, but I do remember that just before they arrested him, he was blurting out all sorts of strange stuff like, he's trying to kill me, he's trying to punish me, the monster, the red devil, forgive me, I did it, but it wasn't me. I guess now that I think of it, he was kinda crazy. The suspect's name was Walter Sullivan. The man was responsible for the murder of Billy and Miriam Locane. The police found zero evidence at the scene of the crime, other than the man himself. No fibres and no fingerprints, just Walter. Before Sullivan's arrest, a spree of murders were being investigated. A total of 10 victims were found, including the two siblings that Walter was arrested for. However, zero evidence was found at any of the crime scenes. Each victim was killed with different tools. Some died with gunshot wounds, and the rest with various instruments. There was no pattern, except for the removal of all their hearts, and each victim were carved with numbers. This wasn't the only link, however. Each victim was carved with Walter's full name. This is the only piece of evidence that links Walter to each murder. For this, Walter will be in prison for the rest of his life. But just 4 days after the recent murders, Walter takes his own life inside his jail cell, using nothing but a soup spoon to cut his own throat. This was the end of Walter Sullivan's story. So we thought. 2 years later, a body was found inside a motel in South Ashfield. The man was beaten to death, and numbers were carved into the body, just like the last 10 victims. But there was one key difference. The victim's heart remained. The police presumed it was a copycat killing, since Walter is dead. But again, a year later, a new body is discovered in the woods near Silent Hill. A woman's body was found, and her cause of death was drowning, but it was treated as a homicide because just like the last victim, this body also had numbers carved onto her body. But this would be the last victim the police discover for quite some time. To truly understand Walter, his motives, and what was the root cause of all his killings, we need to go back to where it all began. The root cause of everything is Henry's room, room 302. Walter was born in this very room, but was immediately abandoned by his parents.
I told you we shouldn't have a baby, didn't I? Get out of here. I can't stand it anymore.
The superintendent, Frank Sunderland, discovered Walter and quickly noticed his parents were absent. Unsure on their whereabouts or how long Walter has been alone for, he calls for an ambulance. Whilst waiting for their arrival, Frank notices Walter's umbilical cord lying on the floor. For some inexplicable reason, Frank decides to keep it, almost as if he was drawn to it.
There are a lot of strange things in this world. The umbilical cord I keep in a box in my room.
Walter spends a few days at St. Jerome's Hospital, and then he's taken to his new home, Wish House. This was an orphanage in Silent Hill that was managed by Silent Hill Smile Support Society, a well-respected charity organisation. At the age of 6, Walter starts taking trips to South Ashfield on his own. He would usually take either the train or bus, but the trip was unusual for a child his age. As to why Walter was going on these trips, that will have to come later. For the majority of Walter's childhood, he mostly stayed in Silent Hill, until he finally ventured out at 19 and moved to Pleasant River, a town not too far from Silent Hill. Here he became a normal student, but this is where the normalcy ends. 5 years later, Walter begins his killing spree. 10 victims in 10 days, all with carvings on their bodies. The first victim had these numbers: 01121, and the 10th victim had 10121. The numbers on the body remained a mystery, but the important question is, what drove Walter to commit these barbaric killings? 8 years after Walter's suicide, a man moves into room 302. His name is Henry Townshend, an ordinary and somewhat lonely man, but he's used to not relying on anyone else. But socialising is something he's not used to. Henry spends 2 years here and doesn't interact with anyone else in the building. Even his next door neighbour, Eileen Galvin, she knows his face and name, but that's about it. Henry is a spectator. Rather than interacting with others, he'd rather watch from afar. Sitting by his window, he watches others live out their lives. Henry enjoys photography too. Throughout his apartment, we can see numerous pictures he took during his visit to Silent Hill. Henry is a lonely man and doesn't depend on anyone else. But that's about to quickly change. 2 years after moving into room 302, Henry starts having reoccurring dreams. He doesn't understand any of them, and he's not even sure if it's from his own memories. These dreams turn into nightmares. He sees his own apartment drenched in blood and covered with rust. The walls are moving, and his memories aren't his own anymore. It's his room, but he's really not sure if it's his anymore. It's almost like Henry has become a completely different person in these nightmares. The nightmares are brief, but it ruins his sleep every time. But these nightmares start bleeding into reality. Henry wakes up one morning to find himself in a real nightmare. The door to his own apartment has been chained up. It's impossible for him to open the door, no matter how hard he tries. But the strangest thing is that it's been chained up from the inside. All his windows are locked, his phone is dead, and no matter how hard he yells or bangs, no one can hear him. Henry is used to being alone and locked up in his own apartment, but this is different. His freedom has been stripped away, and there's no escape. Henry has become a prisoner in his own home. Henry spends 5 days trapped inside his apartment. It's on the 5th day, a strange message appears on his door. It says, "Don't go out, Walter." It's a warning to Henry, but it's not like he can go anywhere anyway. After looking around for a bit, a message gets slid under his door, and it looks like it was written by a child. Henry then eventually hears a loud bang. Investigating the sound, he discovers an otherworldly hole that seems endless. It could be a way out, so with no other option, Henry climbs into it, hoping it leads to freedom. But the hole leads into what seems like a separate reality. The location he's in looks familiar, but there's something wrong with it. This is the train station that's just outside his home. But he wonders, why is he here? Henry eventually runs into another person, and she believes that she is just in a dream, but Henry believes otherwise. Her name is Cynthia, and she wants Henry to help her find an exit. So they stay together, But Cynthia starts to feel sick and runs into the bathroom. Henry waits, but this is where he witnesses true horror. Monsters appear out of nowhere and Henry runs in to get Cynthia, but she's disappeared. The bathroom is empty, but there's another large hole. Henry climbs in, hoping it's a way out, and he wakes up again. It was just another nightmare, he thought, until he realises he is still trapped. He's still stuck inside this nightmare. Henry can go back and forth from his apartment to these strange other worlds, and with each world he finds himself in, he meets different people every time, but then they are mysteriously killed. And when they die in this world, they die in reality. Henry hears police officers talk through his radio.
Hurry up and get that ambulance!
Quit yapping and move her already. Damn, she's got numbers carved into her chest. I wonder if...
He finds out that these killings share similar patterns. They all have numbers carved into them. Walter Sullivan is behind all these killings. There was no copycat, it was all Walter. He has somehow created a nightmarish world where he holds all the power. If you get pulled into it, there's no hiding from him. But there is a lot of questions. How is Walter alive? How has he created these worlds? Why is he killing? Is he truly insane, or is there a lot more to this? As Henry traverses through Walter's worlds, there is someone communicating to Henry with notes. This mysterious person is leaving diary entries behind for Henry to find. Henry has no possible idea who could be doing this, but he gets an idea who it could be through eavesdropping on his neighbours. He finds out this is not the first time this has happened to someone.
Anyway, it's not the first time.
You mean the guy who lived here before?
And it wasn't just him either. There's something wrong with his whole apartment.
They are all aware that Henry is missing. This reminds them about a man named Joseph Schreiber, the previous tenant of room 302. Who is Joseph Schreiber? Well, as we traverse through Walter's hellish worlds, we learn a lot about him. But we don't learn the information from Walter, we learn it from Joseph himself. Each time Henry returns to his room, Joseph leaves behind notes. It becomes quickly apparent that Joseph is most likely dead. If he was the previous tenant of room 302, that means the nightmares Henry was having were actually memories of Joseph. Joseph Schreiber was Walter's final victim. He killed him 1 year before Henry moved into room 302. 4 years before Joseph was killed, he was doing his own investigation on Wish House. There were several rumours that circulated about Silent Hill. The rumours that went around revolved around the cult that secretly runs the town of Silent Hill. The town had a lot of reports about strange incidents, drug trafficking, kidnapping, and a satanic cult. Joseph's article about Wish House had this to say: Wish House, an orphanage on the outskirts of Silent Hill. But behind its false image is a place where children are kidnapped and brainwashed. At its heart, it's a heathen organisation that teaches its own dogma in lieu of good religious values. Mr. Smith, who lives near Wish House, had this to say: Sometimes at night I can hear their weird prayers and the sounds of children crying. I went there to complain one time, but they ran me right out. Since then, it hasn't changed a bit. The religious cult that operates Wish House is known by the locals simply as the Order. It's a religion that is deeply interwoven with Silent Hill's history. I intend to continue my investigation of Wish House and the cult behind it. I've always believed that telling the whole truth and showing the children the true path is our most important duty. If what Joseph said about Wish House is true, then it may explain what happened to Walter. Maybe Walter was never insane to begin with. However, if a cult was actually brainwashing children, it may have led Walter down a dark path. But as of now, we have no clue what kind of brainwashing this cult may have been doing. But what if Walter is actually under direct orders of the cult and is killing on their accord? Just before Joseph's death, he was looking into Walter Sullivan's case, and he found ties to the Wish House. On April 4th, in the same year he was killed, Joseph began to write his diary. April 4th. Lately, I have been feeling like my life is in danger. I have been through a lot in my life, but I have never felt this kind of pure animal fear. In case something happens to me, I've decided to write down what I've learned for whoever you are that's living in the apartment now. I've been investigating the mass murder that took place 7 years ago, in which 10 people were killed in 10 days. They were killed in a variety of ways, but the one thing they had in common was that each corpse had the following numbers carved into them. The name of their killer, it was carved in as well. His name was Walter Sullivan. April 8th. Although the cult is gone, I'm sure the spirit of it is still alive. There are too many strange things happening in that town. I'm investigating 2 people, or maybe I should say just one. I've just about discovered what's going on. The biggest mystery about the Walter Sullivan case were the numbers that were carved into the victims. The police never made any sense of it and just deemed Walter was insane. Joseph was also puzzled by the numbers. However, with his time on the case, he took one more look at all the numbers and he cracked the code. 2nd of May. I figured out the riddle behind the numbers. 01121 is actually 01/21. In other words, 1 out of 21. So Walter was planning on killing 21 people. But he never finished the job. He was convicted for the murders of Billy and Miriam Locane. Afterwards, he committed suicide in his jail cell. The grisly mass murders of 10 people shocked the world, and came to be known as the Walter Sullivan case. There are 2 big puzzles here. The first is, what was his motive for the murders? The second is, why did he kill himself before completing his task? Was he simply insane? Walter intended to kill 21 people exactly, but before he was able to achieve that, he was caught and jailed. But for some mysterious reason, Walter takes his own life, and is now somehow back from the dead, committing more murders. May 14th. It was 4 years ago that they discovered the body 12/21 carved into it. Right away, I had this terrible feeling and couldn't stop shaking. The victim had been murdered 6 months earlier, but Walter had been dead for 7 years, having committed suicide 3 years before the murder. The police think it's a copycat crime, and are calling it the Sullivan case round 2, but something about it bothered me. Joseph continues to write in his diary, but it's not until June 11th he updates his diary with more information about the Walter Sullivan case. Walter did kill himself. He died in his prison cell of blood loss after he stabbed himself in the neck with a spoon. His body was buried in a cemetery just outside of his hometown of Silent Hill, in an unmarked grave. After that, his name became famous all over the world, and it looked like his stream of mass murders was finished at 10 out of 21. But 3 years later, they found a corpse that had 12/21 carved into it. The corpse was from 6 months earlier. In other words, the person was killed 2.5 years after Sullivan committed suicide. The MO was exactly the same as Sullivan's, except one thing. All 10 of Sullivan's victims were found with their hearts cut out, and their chest wounds sewn together expertly with thread. On the other hand, the 12/21 victim still had their heart. Naturally, the police think it's a copycat and are proceeding on that basis, but they haven't made any progress and have recently discovered victim 13. This corpse also had their heart intact. The police still haven't identified a suspect. I've got a working hypothesis. Very few people knew the details of the original crimes and wouldn't be able to copy Sullivan's MO so precisely. First, I'll head to Silent Hill, to the graveyard near that beautiful lake. Maybe I'll find answers there. What Joseph discovers at the graveyard truly terrifies him and completely changes everything he knew about the Walter Sullivan case. June 14th. I'm still in shock. There was no body in the grave, and on top of that, written on the coffin were the numbers 11/21. After Joseph's shocking discovery, he doesn't write for almost a month. Walter Sullivan's grave was empty, and what makes no sense is that it couldn't have been Walter that was buried. If it was, how did Walter get out? It would have been impossible for him to dig himself out. And why would he go through the trouble of filling the grave back up? Did Walter even die in prison? It's not until July 13th Joseph updates his diary. I don't think I can protect myself. He's truly insane. I can't hold on any longer. His powers can't be measured. I was so scared today that I sealed off the back of the storage room. Joseph starts to investigate even further, trying to come up with any plausible explanation. He starts to ask around the apartment building, and this is what he discovered. July 17th. A few days after Walter killed himself in his cell, several residents witnessed a long-haired man with a coat here. Through his window, Richard Braintree in 207 saw the man moving something heavy and doing something in room 302. Even Sunderland, the superintendent, saw the man with a coat hanging around room 302 and confirmed there were signs of someone having been in there. With this information, Joseph began to theorise. July 18th. My theory is that Walter never died at prison. It may have been someone else who committed suicide. Either that, or the person the police arrested was not the real Walter Sullivan. I'm in no position to investigate what really happened at the prison, but in any case, Walter didn't die at the prison. The man with the coat that showed up here was the real Walter. 7 years ago, he did something in that apartment. I'm certain there's a link between that and the bizarre things that have been happening here. Just a little bit more and I'll have this whole thing figured out. I may even find the real Walter is somewhere nearby. After this entry though, Joseph starts seeing things that completely throw rationalisation out of the question. Joseph leaves behind one very important note for Henry. July 20th. You've seen that world as well, that horrible nightmare. But if you get sucked into it, it's not just a nightmare. Don't get lost in there. If you get pulled in, you will be killed. But there's still hope. If you've seen that door with a placard set in it, look on the other side of the door. Then keep going down, to the deepest part of him, and look for the ultimate truth. Joseph leaves behind 2 more notes before he goes missing, presumably killed by Walter. He summarises everything he has found. July 28th. I'm going to summarise everything that I've learned about Walter Sullivan so far. He was born right here in room 302 of South Ashfield Heights. His parents abandoned him soon afterwards and disappeared somewhere, leaving the baby alone. He was discovered and sent to St. Jerome's Hospital. He was adopted by Wish House, an orphanage in the forest near Silent Hill that's run by the secret Silent Hill religious cult. When he was 6 years old, someone from the cult showed him where he was born. Since then, he started to believe that room 302 itself, in other words, this room, was his mother. Every week, he travelled from the orphanage to South Ashfield Heights, a pretty long trip for a kid his age. Sometimes he took the subway and sometimes the bus. I'm tired, my headache is already killing me. I'll write more tomorrow. July 29th. Continuing from yesterday, I'm going to summarise everything I've learnt about Walter Sullivan so far. Naturally, it was a long way for a kid his age to travel, but he made the trip every week by subway or bus. Unfortunately, someone else was living in this apartment, so he couldn't be reunited with his mother. For years, he continued to come here, almost like he was possessed, just to peek into the apartment. Eventually, the tenants began to complain and treat him badly when they saw him hanging around. Walter began to fear the tenants and see them as obstacles, preventing him from seeing his mother. As the years passed and Walter matured, he began to be more and more influenced by the teachings of the cult. Furthermore, his obsession with his mother and his feelings of resentment towards the outer world become even deeper. Walter became preoccupied with one particular tract from the cult's Bible, the descent of the Holy Mother, the 21 sacraments. By the 21 sacraments, the Holy Mother shall appear in the countries of the world and shall bring salvation to the sinful ones. After Walter left Wish House, he moved to Pleasant River, a town neighbouring Silent Hill. For a while, he lived the life of a normal student, but he was still filled with bitterness and resentment towards the rest of the world. Several years later, he launched his plan there, the 21 murders. With Joseph's diary, we uncover Walter's motive for killing. He is trying to complete a ritual called the 21 sacraments, to birth their Holy Mother. But there are still a lot of questions. How is Walter alive? Does he truly believe room 302 is his mother? Did the police really arrest the wrong guy? How has Walter created all these hellish worlds? Why does Walter keep changing his patterns with his killings? Did the cult truly corrupt him, or is he really insane? I think it will be a good idea to start all over. Let's begin with Walter's life at Wish House. Wish House is an evil place that is hidden from the public. There is no proof that children were kidnapped. However, they target orphans to adopt to essentially recruit into their cult. They will be given purpose. They will serve their god. The orphanage was run by many people from the cult, but the 3 names that are important to Walter's story are George Roston, Jimmy Stone, and Andrew DeSalvo. George Roston was the right-hand man of Jimmy Stone, and was ordered to instruct Walter on the 21 sacraments. There is a lot more to this, however. It will become more relevant later. When Walter turned 6, he finally learned how to read and write and began his own diary. Henry and Eileen can find Walter's diary scattered around the Wish house. However, Walter's writing isn't the clearest, so Eileen can only make out parts of it. But if Eileen severely falls under Walter's corruption, she's able to tell the whole story.
October 1. He told me to write whatever. Nobody will see it anyhow. I like to write. Teacher told me how. I can read this writing. It looks like some kind of a diary. October 2. I played with Bob. It was fun. But I went too far and he got really mad. October 3. I played with Bob again. I went even further this time. There was a huge rock. It was really cool. He beat me up after it.
The rock Walter is referring to is this one just outside Wish House. The cult call it the Mother Stone. The person abusing Walter is Andrew DeSalvo. We'll come back to this man later. Walter begins reading the 21 Sacraments, and this is around the time Walter meets someone very, very important.
October 14. I did good reading today. I was so happy, but the 21 Sacraments for the descent of the Holy Mother was hard. October 15. Bob is gone. Nobody will tell me what happened. I bet he did it. Andrew. October 16. Some important people came today. One of them was a lady named Dahlia.
Dahlia is the high priestess and the leader of the cult. Her daughter is Alessa Gillespie. Alessa had psychic abilities, and Dahlia wanted to take advantage of her power and use her to birth their gods. However, she kept close eyes on Walter, since he was going to be used as the cult's backup plan to birth their god. The 21 Sacraments is a ritual they believe will be the solution to birth their paradise if Alessa isn't able to, but the ritual is more complicated than that. George Roston was teaching Walter how to perform it. However, it's going to require more than just 21 bodies. It needs someone with power to be able to venerate this ritual. Walter is not able to do this. Not yet, at least.
October 17. The important lady told me Mommy was asleep in Ashfield. I got a mommy too. I'm really happy. I want to see her. Where is Ashfield anyhow? October 18. I have to stay in the round cell tomorrow even if I read good. If I do it, God will be happy. So I will do it. He comes into the round cell a lot to visit. But it's okay, I guess. October 21. I only leave the round cell on Sunday. Then I go and read the book. I read really good today, too. If I can keep reading the 21 Sacraments for the descent of Holy Mother good, I can see Mommy. That's what the important lady said. But tomorrow I'm going to the round cell again.
Walter is stuck in a place where he's kept in a cell, is forced to read books the cult provides, is abused by the caretaker, and it's a place where his friends go missing. John and Bob were friends with Walter at the orphanage and then mysteriously disappeared. Walter blames Andrew DeSalvo for this since he abuses the children for no particular reason. Walter doesn't have anything to cling on to. The cult are trying to brainwash him with books about rituals, but based off Walter's diary, it's not working. Not until the important lady shows up. That lady being Dahlia. Dahlia tells Walter that his mother was asleep in Ashfield. This news excites Walter because he now knows he has a mother and he can go home. But this is where the manipulation starts. Dahlia promises to take Walter to see his mother only if he can successfully read the 21 Sacraments. Dahlia shows Walter the room, however he is never taken back again, and this is the point where Walter starts venturing off by himself to go see his mother. But the first time he ventures off by himself, he notes that he couldn't find his mother. Most likely due to the fact he's just a child and doesn't remember the way back. While he's lost though, he says some girls on the train said mean things to him, and this made him scared, which caused him to return back to the orphanage, which is where he beats Walter again. Even though the trip was scary for Walter, it never sways him away. But he can't get inside because somebody is living there. This is where it becomes apparent that Walter truly believes the room is physically his mother. Walter must have misunderstood Dahlia when she told him his mother was asleep in Ashfield, and when she showed him the room, Walter must have genuinely thought the room itself was his mother. or Dahlia on purposely told him the room is his mother. There is no confirmation on either of these two, but it's most likely the first one. Walter must have misunderstood Dahlia, and now he believes if he can read the 21 sacraments for the Holy Mother, he can finally be reunited with her. This was Dahlia's plan all along. Whatever Walter believes is his mother or not, Dahlia most likely doesn't care. Either way, she has given Walter the motivation and an overall goal. She has given him a purpose, because once Walter is finally able to read it, he can act on it and bring forth the cult's Holy Mother. Walter doesn't leave Silent Hill till he's 19, so what happened during that time period? Well, with the motivation that Dahlia gave him, he becomes incredibly fixated on the 21 sacraments and continued to learn it over and over again. Andrew DeSalvo takes notice of this behaviour and becomes startled by it.
According to that town's holy scriptures, it was actually the center of their religion. That kid Walter, he was really into that mumbo jumbo. Especially that descent of the Holy Mother business. It was scary.
Andrew was just a caretaker and was never a member of the cult. He never partook in the cult's religion, and the whole thing was alien to him. But Walter studying the 21 sacraments was enough to disturb him. George Roston continued to instruct Walter. They most likely wanted to burn the knowledge of the 21 sacraments into Walter's mind so that he will never forget and will always be reminded of his purpose. During this time though, Walter continued to travel to South Ashfield Heights to see his mother, and the residents began to notice Walter's activities. Walter would knock on the door, slip notes under it and just loitered around. One particular man who took interest was Richard Braintree. He would always catch Walter and scare him off, but no matter what, Walter would always return. Henry finds a tape called The Skinning of Mike. This tape is audio of Richard assaulting another resident of South Ashfield Heights, but towards the end of the tape, Richard notices Walter.
How do you like that, you sick little freak? You had it coming to you. These clothes are disgusting. Get him out of my sight.
I know. It'll be perfect to wrap his body in.
Hold it.
You!
Hold it. I think
You snooping around again?
Myself.
Get your ass out of here before you really piss me off!
Hold it.
Walter saw Richard as a serious obstacle. Every time he would return, Richard was always there to scare him off. This is something Walter would never forget. As Walter got older and more independent, he would take more lengthy trips to South Ashfield and would even stay there. He didn't have a home, so he would take shelter in the train station. Walter would sleep there, and in order for him to get money, he had to beg. At 16 years old, Walter was approached by a little girl who was around the age of 5. This little girl had sympathy for Walter, so she gave him her doll and walked away. This act of kindness brought Walter to tears. This little girl was the only time Walter would ever experience any form of kindness. This little doll belonged to Eileen Galvin, and Walter would never forget this moment. However, Eileen wasn't the only person that Walter would meet during his time sleeping in the train station. Throughout Walter's childhood, he would see another girl around his age every time he was at the train station. Walter liked this girl, and even knew her name since he would always listen to their conversations. Once Walter matured, he struck up enough courage to approach her. This girl's name was Cynthia. Walter didn't particularly smell nice since he was practically homeless. Cynthia took notice of this and said to him, "Filthy, yet handsome." Walter, with little to no social interaction, didn't know how to respond, so he started off by saying her name. This freaked Cynthia out, since this is the first time she's met Walter. But what she didn't know is, it was her and her friends that made fun of Walter on the train over 10 years ago. Walter tells her this, and this causes Cynthia to get mad and accuse Walter of eavesdropping on their conversations the whole time. She eventually storms off. This confuses Walter and somewhat leaves him bitter towards her. He didn't understand what he did wrong. It's clear Walter had feelings for her since he remembered her name for many years, but was never confident enough to approach her. When Walter turned 19, he moved to Pleasant River and became a student. He tried to live a normal life. Walter even showed emotions when he was handed a doll. He cried because someone showed him kindness. And based on Walter's childhood diary, it doesn't give off the impression that he was insane. Something else must have happened before he started killing. And I think I know what may have caused Walter to turn insane. we need to talk about the orphanage Walter grew up in one last time. Jimmy Stone and George Roston were priests of the Voltaire sect. Who or what is Voltaire? Well, they believe it's one of the beings that was created by their god in order to lead people to obey her. They believe if they venerate this angel, they will become closer with God. Voltaire is worshipped as it's the angel that's closest to their god. Voltaire is also worshipped as an executioner. The executioners of the cult wear red hoods in honour of it. Jimmy Stone was one of these executioners and had significant influence in the cult's infrastructure and criminal underworld. He was also known as the Red Devil. Jimmy Stone ordered his right-hand man, George Roston, to brainwash Walter and teach him the 21 sacraments. But like I said before, it's going to take more than just learning how to perform the ritual. It's going to require a certain power to venerate it. George Roston taught Walter everything he needed to know about the 21 sacraments, but there needs to be another ritual to even make the 21 sacraments possible. In order to successfully pull off the 21 sacraments, the person needs supernatural powers to venerate it. George Roston knew a way. Walter would need to be possessed. Voltaire would need to be inserted into Walter's subconscious. This was the only way the ritual would work. Now it's never clear when this happened, but it may have happened just before Walter's killing spree, because Walter's first victim was Jimmy Stone. Walter returned to Silent Hill from Pleasant River. His reason for this is uncertain, but this is where the 21 Sacraments begins. I personally think this is when George Roston placed Voltaire into Walter's head. I do believe he consented to this, simply because he spent most of his life learning the 21 Sacraments to be reunited with his mother. But I don't think any of the cult members were expecting the ritual to backfire. Why would Walter kill members of the cult? The simplest answer is that Walter maybe wasn't as devoted to the cult as they originally thought he was. He only cared about the 21 Sacraments. It's the only way for him to be reunited with his mother. It's been his lifelong obsession. But not only this, a lot of Walter's trauma comes from the cult. He was beaten and thrown into a cell practically every day, and his friends mysteriously disappeared. The cult essentially robbed Walter of living a normal life. He could have been adopted by a loving family instead, but they denied him that. But there is one other thing. If Walter is possessed by Voltaire, I don't think the victims are all that important, religious or not. The only thing that matters is collecting 10 hearts for the 21 Sacraments. So in 10 days, Walter goes on a rampage, killing 10 people and collecting their hearts. The murders took place in Silent Hill, Pleasant River and in South Ashfield. Walter's victims seemed to be picked at random and there was no pattern. Walter did successfully kill 10 people, but was however captured by the police before he could finish the ritual. And this leads into the biggest mystery in the case. He believes the police either captured the wrong person or it wasn't Walter who died in prison. One piece of crucial evidence that Joseph left out of his theory, however, is that there was a statement from a student who attended the same university as Walter, and he said, I quote, "He's trying to kill me. He's trying to punish me. The monster, the Red Devil. Forgive me. I did it, but it wasn't me." Not only was this a confession from Walter, but he also mentions Jimmy Stone's nickname from the orphanage. Based on this statement, Walter must have been temporarily free from Voltaire's possession, but he was trying to say that Jimmy Stone was trying to kill him, despite Jimmy being dead. Well, this could be easily answered. Inside Walter's hellish worlds, his victims haunt it, including Jimmy Stone. It's a possibility that Walter was seeing his ghost. Then the biggest mystery is Walter's death. Joseph says he was buried in his hometown of Silent Hill, and discovers that there was no body inside the coffin, just the numbers 11/21. Joseph asks residents if they've seen anything suspicious at South Ashfield Heights and gets numerous reports of seeing a long-haired man there. Richard Braintree witnesses this man inside of room 302, carrying something heavy. Frank Sunderland confirms that someone had been inside but didn't spot anything unusual. However, Henry makes a gruesome discovery inside a mysteriously walled off section inside his room. Walter became part of the 21 Sacraments. He was victim 11 out of 21, and whatever Walter did here, it looks to be some sort of ritual. But how did Walter get from the graveyard to room 302? Who dug Walter out of his own grave? The easiest answer is that Walter's corpse was resurrected by Voltaire. Walter's possession must have given him supernatural powers to even defy death. If this was the case, it explains why Walter took his own life in his prison cell. It was the only way for him to escape. Examining the room, we can see numerous things that could explain what Walter was carrying when Richard Braintree saw him in room 302. This object Richard described as something heavy. Could this be the cross that Walter is hanging off? But also next to him in the fridge are bags of blood. These are the 10 hearts Walter collected. And on the table are ritual objects. You have the bottle of white chrism and an obsidian goblet. Walter performed the ritual of the Holy Assumption here. This is what the 10 hearts were for. He needed 10 sacrifices to perform this ritual, but it was only possible if he had supernatural abilities. But what did this ritual do? It separated Walter's soul from his flesh and birthed his hellish worlds, and with this power, he is able to finish the 21 sacraments. However, the ritual had an unexpected result. It split Walter's soul into two, and his child self appeared in these worlds. This represents the innocence Walter lost, and was reincarnated as a child. Probably the most innocent he was at that time in his life. And now what's left of him is pure evil, most likely the side Voltaire corrupted. But his soul being divided doesn't change anything. With this power, he can pull each of his victims in and trap them. He no longer needs their heart, he needs their entire body. If Walter traps you here, there's no hiding. You are trapped here until he kills you. And even when you're gone, you will haunt these worlds for whole of eternity. And that is a fate worse than death. The only thing you can pray for is that Walter doesn't choose you.